Hello, and welcome to the Wellness Connection with Fiona Kane. My name is Fiona Kane, and I'm your host. Today, I wanted to talk to you about saving money on food. Essentially, cost of living crisis at the moment. I know in Australia, in Sydney, Australia, we're really feeling it. I think it's something that people are feeling all around the world or in a lot of places. Unfortunately, I can only speak from a perspective of Sydney, but for some of you, this will make sense, and some of it might not. But food is food, but it's just a little bit different with availability in different places. But yeah, I'm just going to chat to you a little bit about ways to save money in regards to food. So sometimes people think that eating fast food is cheaper than buying, eating healthy food. And look, it can be depending, if you're comparing going to a fancy restaurant and going to somewhere where you get something for $5 or $10, of course, yes. But if you're comparing home cooked meals versus takeaway, as a one-off, it might be cheaper to do the takeaway, but as an ongoing thing, and it might be, not always, but as ongoing thing, no, you're going to save a lot more money by cooking at home. And one of those reasons is because there are things that you will use a lot. So for example, if you have things like whether it's rice or whether it's sauces that you have, or whether you have olive oil, those kinds of products, they will last many meals. They won't just last one meal, particularly your olive oil. So things like that, they're sort of the pantry staples that you get. So one shop in every so many shops will be much more expensive shop because that's when you will get those things. By the way, I'm actually pretty careful with that too. I use Cobram olive oil. I love it. And I've noticed that in the popular supermarkets in Sydney, that it goes on sale to 40% off and even sometimes 50% off every few months. And so I actually buy a few of them if I can, every time they go on sale. So it keeps me going into the next time it's 40 or 50% off. I haven't quite worked out what the cycle is. I don't know if it's every 3 months or what it is, but it's semi-regular. So there's things like that too, that if you notice certain cycles at your supermarket, you might be able to, if you can afford to, not everyone can, if you can afford to, you might be able to buy a couple of things, sometimes I will buy if I can afford it, I will buy 6 of something. Sometimes I can't afford it. I simply just can't do that. But if you can, you certainly will save money that way if you know that it's a pantry staple, something that you use all of the time. So there are more expensive shops that you will do because you will buy those pantry staples, but they will last you longer. But in regards to the fresh veggies and fresh fruit and things like that, now, fresh and frozen are quite similar, so there's no reason that you can't interchange that. There's also no reason that you can't freeze the veggies. That if you have fresh veggies, you can freeze them yourself. And you can freeze them. I think I'll double check here. I think it's up to 12 months that you can do that. Yeah, at 8 to 12 months. So that you can freeze your own. So whether you have frozen veggies or you freeze your own, you can certainly do that. And in regards to canned food has been heated to can it. There's a heating sort of process, and so it might have been a bit more damaged, but still it's okay. But I would prefer fresh or frozen. The other issue with canned is in regards to fruit. Canned fruits tend to have a lot of syrup in them, a lot of like sugary syrup. So I would stay away from the syrups. So fresh or frozen fruit, I think, is better. But if you do have the canned stuff, just don't eat all the syrup stuff because it's just all sugary syrup, not good. And that adds on to the fruit. So the fruit itself is fine, but it's when you add all of that extra syrupy stuff to it that it becomes a problem. So the other thing too, in regards to your fruit and veggies, is try and buy what is on sale and plan your meals around that. And if you can, learn to be flexible with what you're using. So, and try different things, try new things. Now, if you're lucky, I'm so lucky. I live in the Hawkesbury area of Sydney, and we have pretty much farm gate places all around us. There's 2 or 3 in every different direction, and so we get to go straight to the farm and buy the produce there. So lucky, so grateful. If you don't have that, and you have a good quality farmers market, go to your farmers market. If you don't have that, but you maybe have a fruit shop that you can go to, a fruit shop can be great. Fruit shops, in my experience, more often than not, but not always, but more often than not, they're a bit cheaper than the supermarkets, because the supermarkets. Well, anyway, the supermarkets make money on some things and not on others. But the fruit and veg isn't always that cheap in supermarkets, but it's often cheaper in fruit and veg shops. The other thing in a fruit and veg shop is you talk. If you talk to your local fruiterer, it makes me think of Con the Fruiterer from that's a comedy show that was on in the 80s or 90s in Australia. I don't know. Anyway, I got distracted there. But your local fruit shop, often you'll find that they will really know their produce. So they might actually help you in regards to trying something new. So that you might see that there's a vegetable on sale, and if you've never had it before, and they'll tell you what it is and they'll tell you how to cook it. So it can be quite handy that way, that they can just have that knowledge to tell you how to take advantage of the produce, and you try something new, you try something different. So being flexible about what you will eat is really, really helpful. And even in regards to, if you cook a bolognese, you can use beef mince, but you could also use chicken mince, or you could use lamb mince, or it could be kangaroo mince, or turkey mince, or chicken mince. Like, all of the different proteins it could be. So don't limit yourself, or you could use a vegetarian kind if that makes you happy, but don't limit yourself to there's only one kind of protein. You can only have beef. If beef is not the thing that's on sale, choose the one that is on sale. The other thing is, like I was saying with vegetables, be open minded to try different ones and learn new ways of cooking them, and experiment with them, because you will find that maybe the broccoli is really expensive, but the bok choy is on sale, or the spinach is on sale, or some other green vegetable is on sale, or maybe it's the orange vegetables that are all on sale. So you'll just have a bit more of an orange week this week. That's okay. And next week, beetroot is going to be on sale next week, but last week it was carrots, or whatever it is. But you can certainly adapt. Essentially, if your meals have a mixture of vegetables and protein, then you can adapt what those proteins and vegetables are depending on what is available and depending on what is on sale. So be sort of open minded to that. Also, things like if you get herbs and spices, even just like a mixed herbs type shaker in the supermarket, that will last you a long time. Or you can grow your own if you want to do that, if you're able to do that. Or you can even, some of the olive oils, like I know Cobram do this, I'm sure other brands do as well, where they have infused oils. So they might have an olive oil that's infused with garlic, or it's infused with herbs, or it's infused with lemon or something. And something like that can be really, really useful, because you get the flavor, but you don't have to buy all of the other products as well. So you might use a little bit of the lemon infused olive oil, and then the rest of it is just a plain olive oil. But that lemon infused olive oil will last you lots of meals. And if you can't access fresh lemons, or if you can't access certain herbs, so you can certainly use infused olive oils as well, because they last many meals, not just one meal. The other thing too is that what you can do is there's lots of different ways of storing your fruit and vegetables. And if you know how to do that well, then and I'll put a link into a download I've got for this too. I'll put the link in the show notes. But when you know how to store your fruit and vegetables, you will save money doing that as well. So, for example, like I said before, with your fresh veggies, you can freeze them for 8 to 12 months. You can also freeze avocados for up to 3 months. Did you know that? And so, avocados, they go on sale. You can get a few when they go on sale, but the problem is we often waste them because they all go ripe. So, excuse me. So, what I do with my avocados is I have them in a bowl, and on my bench, because they shouldn't be in the fridge unless they're ripe. So I have them on a bowl on the bench until they're ripe, and if I still haven't used them, then I put them in the fridge. And then if you get to a point where you think, okay, I haven't used it, then you can certainly put it in the freezer. I'll talk to you a bit about how that's done in a moment. But and up to 3 months. But the other thing too is if you've got a lot left over, you haven't used it, then what I will do is the other thing I do is make up just like an avocado mash type thing. So it's a bit like a guacamole, or guacamole. So I make my own version of a guacamole, and I'll put it in some lemon, some olive oil. You can add things like chili or garlic. I even add sometimes I get the sandwich stackers, which are like the pickled cucumber type things. I might cut them up and put them in salt, pepper, whatever. But you could certainly make like a guacamole to have that with your roast veggies, to have that with your meal. It's quite yummy. Or to have it as like not so much a sauce, but like you put it over you could put it on your chicken or put it on your whatever the meat is that you're having. So it can work really nicely that way. Or you could do your avo toast or something if you wanted to, if that's what you'd like to have. So the other thing in regards to avocados, so in regards to the freezing, there's a few different ways of freezing avocados. Let me just see if I've got it here. I don't think I've got that handy. Uh, It'll be on the download. I'll put it in the download, but there's different ways you can do it, whether it's whole or whether it's halves, that you can do it. And I don't have that right in front of me, so that's the download, the avocado one. I won't say it wrong. The other thing too is that if you Google a lot of these things, there's a lot of great information, but I will give you the download that tells you exactly how that's done. Um, in regards to your leafy greens, they can be washed and kept in muslin bags. Now, muslin bags, they're just cotton, but they're cotton with a bigger, like a weave that has, it's a more open weave, so it's got more breathing in it. And I'm sure you could get those from Spotlight or some sort of uh, shop that sells sewing materials and that kind of thing. You might be able to get it from homewares type shops as well. You can give me some feedback in the comments if you want to tell me places that you know that you can get muslin bags. But essentially, with leafy greens, if you wash them and then keep them in the muslin bags in the fridge, they will last longer. And so that's another kind of useful tip. Also, things like onions and potatoes, they need to be kept separately, and they need to be in a cool, dry place. So you can put them into mesh bags. I've kind of just got mine in bowls, but they're in separate bowls and in separate cupboards. Mine are, so that they're not in together. The problem is if they're too close to each other, they essentially cause each other to rot. Well, the potatoes tend to rot and the onions tend to liquefy. I've had that happen before in both cases. That's what they do to each other. So it's best because of the gases. I think it's ethylene gas. I don't know, but anyway, keep them apart. So your potatoes, your onions, keep them apart, and either in mesh bags or in kind of a bowl or something, but somewhere where there's a bit of you want at least a little bit of air going through, but a bit dark, somewhere dark in your pantry or somewhere like that, and definitely not together. So the other thing too is that other fruits that will kind of ripen each other up are things like bananas, avocados, and peaches. They also produce ethylene gas, which it's a ripening hormone. So it speeds up the ripening. So if you have avocados that aren't ripe but you want them to be ripe soon, I would be putting them in a paper bag and put them in with bananas. And the ethylene gas from the bananas will help ripen the avocados. But if you don't want them to ripen or too fast, or if they're already ripe, then you want to definitely keep them apart. So it's understanding that putting all things together in a fruit bowl can be a good thing if you want, if you want your avocados to ripen, or a bad thing if you don't want them to ripen too quickly. So it's good to understand just which things to put together and why, or when to keep them apart. In the fridge, you can also store things like peaches and apples, oranges, squash, carrots, as well as kind of thick-skinned items, either in mesh or muslin bags. So, and you can buy different containers and things to put things in, but I think just this mesh and muslin and stuff works quite well. Um, so, yeah, avocados, mangoes, melons, pears, and apples, they all continue to ripen if they're left out on a countertop. So essentially, you leave them out on a countertop until they are ripe, and then you put them in the fridge, or if you haven't eaten them already. Whereas things like grapes, citrus, and berries, they generally will deteriorate and they're best kept in the fridge. So you can keep some of the citrus out for a little while to ripen, but then pop them in the fridge. And tomatoes, they continue to ripen as well. So I tend to keep them on the kitchen counter. They should be really kept at room temperature. They are kind of like a tropical fruit, so they need to stay on the counter. If they start getting to the point where they're overripe, that's when it's time to make a bolognese sauce, or even just like mashing up the tomatoes and freezing them so you can use them as some sort of sauce in the future. But a bolognese sauce is fantastic for that. You make a really big batch of bolognese and you freeze it all, and so then you've used up those tomatoes rather than letting them all go off and overripe. So the other thing is two things like asparagus. You can wrap damp paper towels around the bases of the asparagus, store it, or try storing it upright in a glass within about an inch of water, so it keeps it hydrated and delays that sort of wilting. With fresh, soft herbs, I treat them a little bit like I would a bunch of flowers. So I pop them in some water as well and just leave them on the counter. So that's things like dill and parsley, mint, coriander, basil. With the hard herbs like sage and rosemary, thyme. Oh, I'm thinking of a song here. Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Uh, um, that's a song. So I'm not talking about the parsley here. I'm talking about the hard herbs. But anyway, the hard herbs, they last longer if they're stored in the fridge. But you wrap them in some paper towel and you put them in airtight containers or resealable bags, and you pop them in the fridge. So just knowing some basic things like that in regards to how to store your fruit and vegetables, when to have them on the bench, when to put them in the fridge, when you can freeze them, if to freeze them, and then also just how to use things up. Like I said, if you've got a whole bunch of tomatoes there, that's when you're going to be making that bolognese type sauce or some sort of tomato sauce or tomato soup. And you can Google so many recipes. It's so easy to find these sorts of recipes. Or if you've got a whole bunch of avocado, either you freeze it or you make some guacamole, right? And then what I do is, I'm getting towards the end of the week or the end of my shopping weeks, and when the fridge is starting to become bare, and I go in and I look for any of the vegetables, like, because I used to be in the habit of kind of throwing them all out, right? I don't do that. Well, I don't do that as often now because I've really made a point of going there, finding all the veggies and all the leftover veggies. So if there's a couple of carrots just hanging in there, and there's some zucchini, and there's some broccoli, and there's some pumpkin or sweet potato or whatever it is, and basically I roast them all. So essentially the green ones don't need as long. So things like broccoli and stuff, you can just put that in for 20 minutes, or it depends on much you how high the temperature is and how much you want it cooked. But essentially, all of all the hard vegetables, the zucchinis and the pumpkins and the sweet potatoes or potatoes or anything like that will always take longer. So I always give them 45 minutes to an hour, depending on what size you've cut them. And I'm usually somewhere between the 180 or 200 degrees Celsius. I'm talking about temperature, and I just use olive oil, a bit of olive oil, and then I just use salt and pepper, and I like to use a bit of some herbs, either some fresh, like some uh, what are they called? Not fresh herbs, but I was just talking about them before, like the dried herbs, or you could use some olive oil that's a bit infused, and you could bake all of these. You could also, if you wanted to, if you had the tomato and you wanted to use up the tomatoes, you could mash them all up into a bit of a sauce and just pop that in there as a bit of a sauce for these vegetables. So it could be kind of a tomato veggie mash. Not completely mashed though, but just combined. So you don't really want to mash it. You can if it makes you happy, but yeah, I'd be roasting them and just having the tomato as a sauce. And you've got to certainly put in things like garlic, that sort of thing. And you basically roast all of those up, 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the size of the veggies and which type of vegetable. And then you've got all these beautiful roast vegetables, and then you just need to add some protein to them. So you might have some leftover chicken or some leftover ham, or you might have a couple of cans of like canned fish. So might be I had some mackerel with some leftover pumpkin the other day. It was beautiful. Or you might have, a 4-bean mix. You mix it with that, a couple of 4-bean mixes to get that sort of, or some chickpeas or something like that. You might have, like if you don't have any other protein, but you've got some bacon around, I'll often put the bacon in when I'm roasting those vegetables, and you just lay the bacon over the top, and you get that beautiful flavor in the vegetables, and the bacon goes nice and crunchy. So you can sort of just have like a bit, pretty much like a bacon and veggie meal, and it's beautiful. It's really, really yum. So essentially, it's just going through, looking for all of your leftovers and using them all up. The other way of doing this, or the other kind of thing that I so I know we did when I was growing up is, bubble and squeak. And essentially that was when, you'd have the leftovers of the roast dinner from the other night, and you'd have your leftover bit of chicken, and you left over this and you left over that. And basically you just cook some eggs, and in amongst your eggs, you'd throw in all of the leftover veggies and the leftover chicken and whatever else you had. So that's another way, just a big pan, and basically you just throw it all in, all the leftovers, and you can add some egg or bacon to that or something if you want to. And that's just a yummy kind of way of using it all up too. So essentially, it's just being really mindful about trying to buy what's on sale, trying to be flexible about which protein you use the one that's on sale, or which vegetables you're going to use, and then knowing how to store them, knowing how to freeze them or store them, or when to put them in the fridge, that kind of thing. At first, it's a bit confusing if you don't know this stuff, and I'm just learning a lot of it myself too. I've never been a great one for the kitchen, but I'm learning because I've tried to save money, because money is really challenging for a lot of people right now, including me. So I'm really trying to be sensible about this and learn these skills, and teach them to my clients as well. Kind of the stuff that our great grandmothers would have all known and passed on to each other, but because we've had such easy access to food in the Western world, that we've kind of lost the touch of this because we do the Uber Eats or whatever. But it's just good to get back to basics. Look, the other thing is to, soups and stews, make it soups and stews, or bolognese sauces or things like that. And you can store those in the fridge and the freezer, but particularly in the freezer. So what we will do is we'll make a big batch of something, and then we'll have some for tonight's dinner, some for tomorrow night's dinner, and the rest of it will be frozen, or just some for tonight and then freeze the rest of it. And then you cook something, the next few nights. So often what happens is, in the school holidays, or at times where we've got more availability, we might cook more. My husband does most of the cooking, but I do some. But we might cook more for a few days in a row because we've just got time, and then we put it all away. And then when we're really busy and life gets busy, we've got kind of meals that we can just pull out of the freezer. So it's a way of having frozen meals that you've made yourself, that don't cost you the earth, and that the nutrition that's in them, right? So a bit of planning, a bit of understanding about how to store things, a bit of playing around with how to cook different things. You can only do it really badly once. Like I'm not a great cook, but I don't. It's not that hard to do basic stuff. I don't do fancy baking or anything like that, but just basic, just learning how to roast things like veggies, and just always do extra if you can. If you've got extra, then do extra. Like if you know that you're likely to throw away the rest of that pumpkin at the end of this week, cook the whole thing. And even if it doesn't fit in that container, but if there's space in your oven and you've got another smaller container that you can put somewhere else in the oven and stick the rest of that pumpkin in there, do that. If you know you're not going to use it later, then cook it, and then that can be your lunch tomorrow. And I do with whether I do just last night I did like pumpkin fries, like fries made like wedges fries kind of thing, made from pumpkin. I often do that with pumpkin or sweet potato. But then, the next day, like I said, that with can of mackerel, beautiful. Or it could be some ham that you have, or whatever protein you like to use, or like I said, a four bean mix. But anyway, I just wanted to give you some ideas of things you can do to help you save money. Look, the other thing too is that if you join a buying collective, I know there are certainly some family groups and some people who have groups where they do go and buy things together. They'll do an order together. I certainly know that people from Europe and the Middle East often will go to they'll go to the butchers and they'll buy a cow for the family. So the family will all go in and they'll buy a cow, and they'll just get the butcher to cut it up into whatever bits that everyone wants. But then that family, it's a lot more affordable because they buy the whole cow, right? So I know that uh, if you look at what, like I said, the Europeans, Middle Easterns, often they're really good at this stuff. They've got a really good way of doing this because they've been doing it for a long time, and they often live in or come from large family groups, so they're used to doing things as a collective. So you can also get some really good tips off people like that who can really teach you what they do and things that we could learn to do ourselves. Anyway, I hope that gives you some ideas, and I'm certainly open to any ideas you have in the feedback. And I will put a link into the download that explains some of this stuff too as well, so you've got that information handy for yourself. I hope you have a great week. I'll talk to you again next week. Thank you so much. Bye.